Okay, so welcome back, folks, to Management 760. Today is going to be Chapter 6 of the textbook. It also happens to be Module 6 or Week 6 in our course. There won't be an advanced lecture, a 6B, so this is 6A, just sort of following our pattern. This chapter on making competitive and cooperative moves is a pretty good chapter in introducing you to words and phrases that strategists use to make basically their moves on a chessboard. If we went any further than what's in the chapter, we would be getting into topics that could be a whole course in and of themselves. For instance, a thing called game theory and the whole fascinating area of negotiations. That is a field and topic unto itself. So we're going to give you a chance here in the B part of the week to continue working on Skill Builder number 2 for the integrative case. And if you just kind of peruse through, starting on slide 4, the various learning objectives, that takes us through slide 6. You can read those for yourself. So slide 7, making competitive moves. I actually assigned this book years ago in my strategy course. It's Sun Tzu's classic book called The Art of War. I think this was written, God, don't fault me here if I get this wrong, but it was certainly 500 or 600 years BC. So it goes way back to Chinese military strategy at the time. There are some strategists that draw parallels between business level strategy and military strategy, but I'm not quite sure I buy into that. If you saw from my bio, I spent some time in the Combat Corps of Engineers. I was, in fact, a service brat. My father was a career Army officer, and in 5th grade, I was reading his West Point books on the great battles that they used to study. I think there is some kind of an analogy, but I wouldn't take it any further than that. So what we're going to talk is, first of all, in the chapter, is a series of moves, chess moves, that we can make against our rivals. And you can see on slide 7, we're going to discuss first mover advantage, disruptive innovations, footholds, blue ocean strategy, and bricolage, if I am pronouncing that right. That's the way I've pronounced it over the years. I need to kind of look that up. So first mover advantage, Michael Porter introduced us to that in 1980. And it basically is, as it says, is that in many competitive spaces, the first competitor into a space, so taking products and services into a market, the first one there wins the spoils. And, you know, the example that's given there is Apple in its founding in the early 80s, was able to have a tremendous first mover advantage by virtue of its very user-friendly interfaces, kind of dating all of us, I guess, here. Well, certainly not me. But before, you actually had to write code and do some complicated things until Apple came along, and then, of course, Microsoft and others met them. Not all first mover moves are successes. Some are failures, and you can see here reference to Apple's Newton, where they tried to have a first mover advantage in what were called PDAs, or personal digital assistants. Those were the way early first look at eventually what would be a smartphone. In the interim, we had BlackBerry and other kinds of offerings. But the first mover advantage, the opposite of that would be a close follower. So we used to think the first mover advantage was key in a number of markets, as I mentioned. But for instance, International Paper, somewhere in its vision, mission, value statement, says that they will be if I can say that again, they will be a close follower. They're not interested in innovation per se, that they will copy or try to copy their key rivals' moves. Slide 9 talks about disruptive innovations, and you can see some of the classic examples there, from a desktop computer to a tablet, from compact discs to digital downloads, and then from that very old looking camera from I guess the early 1900s maybe, to the digital camera, and of course now the cameras in smartphones rival some of the picture and video taking quality in some digital cameras. So a disruptive innovation obviously is pretty close to a first mover advantage, and if we can affect one of those, we probably do have a first mover advantage. What we know is that, and we don't have time to discuss innovation in our course. It's a fascinating topic that has swept boards of directors in the United States and Europe as a way for American and European enterprises to combat the low-cost position of China and others. But in the established firm, primarily, you remember we've discussed those 4 kinds of barriers. Actually, disruptive innovation is difficult to do, but the firms that can do it can usually win a first mover advantage. Slide 10 talks about a foothold, and the example there is IKEA, as it's looking into new markets around the world, will simply open one store as sort of a beta test about how that store will actually fare in that particular market. If it works well, they'll build more. And then again it talks about the pharmaceutical giant Merck establishing a foothold. A foothold is also very, very close to a fighting brand, which is what we'll talk about what we can do to combat competitors' moves in just a few slides. Blue ocean strategy came into the strategy literature in about 2005 by a book of that title, Blue Ocean Strategy. And here is where we basically try to create a very advantaged future. And the concept or the phrase you'll hear is to, quote unquote, make the competition irrelevant. Their favorite example is Cirque du Soleil. If you're familiar with that, actually I think it's a great offering. Walt Disney bought them out, but if you've ever seen Cirque du Soleil live or on PBS, it's a fascinating offering, and especially if you compare that offering with that of Ringling Brothers, sort of the typical circus, you can see vast differences. Well, the typical service fell into what they call a red ocean strategy, and that is the strategy of fighting a commodity status. And as we've discussed all course long, if we get caught in a commodity status, usually the only variable we have to compete on is price, and we get caught into lowering prices. The blue ocean strategy tries to make the competition irrelevant, create our own future so that we can charge the premium prices that the market will bear. So I think the example they gave, Ringling Brothers prices fell to like $24 a ticket, where Cirque du Soleil, the basic ticket I think was $125, and then premium seating was $250 and up. This kind of a weird phrase. I don't know how this came into the strategy literature, and it's interesting they place it in this chapter, but bricolage, and they talk about it as basically using whatever resources you have at hand. And the picture from the chapter, we're on slide 612 now, talks about Johnny Depp combining a member of the Rolling Stones with a cartoon to create his great character in the movie that I'm escaping here. You all fill in the title of the movie. Usually bricolage is brought about when we need a very, very fast response to something. And very quickly, example, Mallinckrodt in St. Louis, one of my client engagements from about, when would that have been, 2001. They make medical implants, so all of their products had to go through FDA approval, Federal Drug Administration approval. Well, they denied the next 3 of their products coming up in the line. And as you can imagine, this put them into a tailspin for revenue. Well, what was the solution? What was the Bricolage solution? It was actually to go to competitors and ask if they can resell some of their competitors' own products branded under the Mallinckrodt brand. They had some capacity in their manufacturing plants, and that was the solution at hand. So Mallinckrodt fashioned whatever it could do at the time to escape that absolute crisis. So how do we think about then? Those are some of the moves, chess moves we can make. How do we respond to competitors' moves? And the chapter talks about the acronym CMA. Well, first of all, we have to have an awareness that a competitor has made a significant move that could be damaging to us. And this is part of a subfield in strategy called competitive intelligence or benchmarking. We have to have a certain amount of awareness about what our rivals are doing. And the only way to do that is to have an active program to legally capture intelligence on those competitors. Fascinating subfield, has its own professional society, its own professional certification. Benchmarking is related, and actually the two go hand in hand. Benchmarking is simply benchmarking what is best in class in a given function, a given process, and creating measures around best in class. So the last lecture we'll talk about process cycle time, and that's basically how fast we can do things. So what is the best in class cycle time, let's say, for new product development? Is it 4 years? Is it 6 months? Well, obviously we'd like to have shorter times as best in class than longer in new product development. So first of all, we need to be aware that rivals are making critical moves against us. Then we have to have the motivation to actually respond, and or as they say on slide 14, we have to be highly motivated to retaliate. Sometimes we get caught off guard by our rivals' moves, and we may have to take resources from critical initiatives that we have launched to mount some kind of a retaliatory move. So we have to have the actual motivation to do that. And then we have to have the capability. Again, we have to have some excess resources to actually do that. And so we have to have cash reserves. Cash reserves to mount one of the retaliatory moves, as we've discussed all session long, is reducing prices, increasing our marketing, increasing our advertising as a retaliation, as part of our retaliation against rivals. Okay, so many times in today's world, the speed of response is critical. If we can't mount the capability to retaliate or respond in a very timely fashion, we're probably better off not mounting that kind of response. And we talk about RC Cola many times being eclipsed. Over the years, they've invented a lot of great new products, but Coca-Cola and Pepsi have monitored what they're doing, legally monitored, because we also can have illegal competitive intelligence, which can land folks in jail, and that's not a good thing either. But they have been able to retard the various moves of RC Cola just by their sheer market power. You may not know, I used to teach a case study on the cola wars that currently between Coke and Pepsi, they have close to 70% market share of the carbonated soft drink business in the United States, and the other players have very small percentage market shares relative to Coke and Pepsi. There's a notion of multi-point competition. Again, this chapter is just introducing you to words or phrases that strategists use. They just throw them around, sort of the top of mind. And it's a situation where we faced rivals in more than one market. For instance, had a client 14-month engagement with Alpo Pet Foods, and we competed against Heinz, which obviously sells pickles and ketchup and mustard. They also sell pet food. And the Mars Company, the two Mars brothers, very reclusive billionaires that obviously have the candy bar business, but they also have pet food. And so Apple, Heinz, and Mars met each other in multiple markets, multiple products. And sometimes retaliation wars would bring on retaliation in different markets. So Heinz might make a move in the pickle market, let's say, and Mars might retaliate in pet food. Very fascinating area of competition. Not everything needs to be though rivalrous. We can engage in what we call mutual forbearance, and that's basically the two competitors look each other and they basically say, it's not worth the two of us fighting each other. Why should we get into a downward spiral in prices, an increase in marketing budget and marketing expenditure? And so we just simply choose not to compete in each other's markets. The domestic steel competitors for many years have taken that stance, that they will basically leave each other's base business, so known customers of Lone Star Steel or U.S. Steel, that the base business was sort of untouchable, and that new products and services were open to competition, but there would be mutual forbearance in each of the competitors' base business. That's changed a little bit with the consolidating of that industry. U.S. Steel bought out Lone Star Steel, so we're seeing now the emergence of just a few major rivals in the domestic, and by domestic I mean United States steel industry. So talking in about disruptive innovation, three main ways that we can respond to that move. Let's say we are disrupted in our base business. Well, we could ignore it. We can choose to retreat. That's another term the authors didn't bring in the chapter. We can retreat to our base business and ignore it. We can engage, as slide 19 says, we can engage in a counterattack in different goods and services. That's that multi-point competition. Or we can directly try to match the rival's move. And the example there is Merrill Lynch chose to come up with its own version of online trading when I guess it was E-Trade that was the first one to make a move against the classic physical offices of Merrill Lynch. The notion of fighting brands, very interesting here. Sometimes competitors get so much in a frenzy where they try to meet each other's moves by increasing the features and benefits of what they offer. Remember a couple lectures ago, that's part of what we offer to give customers value. You remember benefits minus burden equal customer value. But we can get in this frenzy of increasing features and benefits, and by the way, increasing the price point, that at the bottom of the offering, there's a huge hole, and there is the opportunity for a competitor to enter with a fighting brand against us. Give you a quick example. 15 years ago, there was a software out for the Salesforce called ACT. And when it first came out, it was a great piece of software. You could track your leads, it gave you all of the the contact information, how many calls you had made. You could write down, your comments about each sales call. You could put in there little ticklers about what you need to do. Well, through time, competitors entered, and ACT got into a situation of increasing the features and benefits and its price point to the point where they really outfoxed themselves by offering something that was too complex. I can remember I bought the advanced version and it almost filled my then desktop computer. Made the computer very slow. There were a lot of features and benefits I didn't need. And I can't remember who the competitor was, but entered with a no-frills fighting brand and really gave ACT a lot of headaches. In fact, I think ACT ended up selling out. Not all moves need to be competitive. We can make cooperative moves as well. And the two major forms on slide 22 is a joint venture. There is where two competitors form a separate legal organization called a joint venture to go and tackle some things. By the way, and I hope you think it's a great book, Playing to Win, numerous examples of Procter & Gamble entering into joint ventures with its competitors. Slide 23, a strategic alliance, is the same thing except it's a very loose, I'm going to use the male, gentlemanly agreement to go do something together. The example is Merck and Par Excel, if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not familiar with that particular example, but you'll notice the goal of collaborating on biotechnology efforts known as biosimilars. Well, you know, what they don't say in this example is for those products where the patents have run out for Merck, and so a strategic alliance was their way to add to the product life cycle and extend some life to those products for which the patents had run out. A co-location strategy, I like this example here as La Quinta hotels being Spanish for next to Denny's. Very smart on La Quinta. If you ever stayed in one, you'll notice there's no restaurant. You check in at 2 a.m. in the morning, tough. You're only going to go to the vending machine. But you'll notice that next to, within walking distance, you don't even need to get in your car, is typically a Denny's. And so that is a cooperative move called co-location. Finally, to round out our lexicon or vocabulary of competitive and cooperative moves is a notion called co-opetition. And a great example is, in fact, Toyota and General Motors getting together in California where they created NUMMI, which was a collaboration in designs of automobiles with Toyota and GM. The plant was employees from both Toyota and General Motors worked side by side in collaborating on new product designs. So that's it for this chapter. The objective is to just put some basic terminology of moves and counter moves, and then a couple of collaborative moves that we can make. So thank you very much, and look forward to lecture next week, which will be our last week of the session. Thanks very much.